I stand here today with a heavy heart. I stand in my stilettos as we have been called upon by the President of the Law Society, President Semakade, that the women lawyers must show up in their stilettos and make meaning of it. Because our nation is bleeding. I take this opportunity to greet the President of this country, President Joel Museveni, and the other T name that because of my Acholi tongue I cannot pronounce very well. I greet him and recognize him in that capacity. I greet our President, President Semakade, and the Council, and recognize you in that capacity. Since you took over office, it has been controversy after controversy, but for me, the controversies are all about a better Uganda. How do we lead this Uganda in compliance with the laws of this country? The national laws, the international laws, the regional laws, the sub-regional laws, that we have spent a lot of taxpayers' money flying members of parliament, people from Ministry of Foreign Affairs, etc., to go be part of the discussions around these laws, adopt these laws in our parliament, ratify them at the international, regional level, and commit to adhere to them. Taxpayers' money has gone down the drain if we do not wake up. Section 3 of the Uganda Law Society Act, that has been my push factor in everything I have done in the classroom, showed up for ULS activities. It has been Section 3, calls on us as members of the Uganda Law Society to lead this country and give a sense of direction where the rule of law is being watered down. So I recognize the President of the Radical New Bar and his council for relentlessly screaming over his head, or their heads, together with the VC, in every platform, every podium, every Twitter, every social media message. And in our School of Law platform, my year 1999, they say they are love letters, every so-called love letter, but screaming for democracy, the rule of law and justice in this country. Fellow citizens, I recognize you too. And I also recognize the chief guest today, Mrs. Lukwago, Zalwangu. I had never sat anywhere close to Mr. Lukwago except watching him on TV as a mayor, as a lawyer, and doing what he does best. This is the first time in my life I am sitting even close to his wife. I've never known her. When I was asked to come and speak today and represent the women and be in solidarity with her, of course you fear, you wonder about the children you're leaving behind and so on. But I must show up. I must show up because we have women who have showed up before us and spoken loud and clear, who I also recognize today. So many of them, I must, led by Honorable Matembe. So many, all the women in the women's movement, Honorable Betty Byanyima, Dr. Zedrika, Sarah Berete, Prima Kwagala, FIDA, the FIDA leadership, UONET, so many. I must show up and represent the women's movement. And we stand up with our sister. And you know, I laughed. I laughed and said, now I'm even an Alongo. Maybe that's the reason God made me also an Alongo, so that I can come and stand by my sister, Nalongo Zalwango, in this very difficult time. We know our sisters, my colleague Zahara, Dr. Zahara Nampewa at the School of Law has suffered the same ordeal. Bobby Wine's wife has suffered the same ordeal, and we are still suffering. But we want to raise our voices to the nation, to the president. And for me today, I chose to come and speak to the president, to use this platform to speak to the president and say, President Museveni, please talk to us as a nation. Speak to us. We need to know where we are heading in this Kisanja no more sleep. Recently, you gave us your, what is it called? The State of the Nation address. My plea to you is that you give us a part 2 of the State of the Nation address very, very soon, maybe by end of business today, to tell us about the state of constitutionalism, rule of law, and governance in this country. Your previous State of the Nation address spoke about PDM, about the cattle corridor in the 1950s, I don't know what, about imperialism, correcting us that it's not Kisanja no sleep, but Kisanja no more sleep, to fight poor governance, corruption in this country. And here we are. Here we are watching the Pearl of Africa deteriorating with one circus after another, that we are finding it even hard to sleep in our homes, in our beds. We don't know who is next. So as our father, President Joel Museveni, and Mama Janet, just a few months ago, I think you delivered some kind of national apology. There was a national apology to the nation for the mistakes that have been made since 1986 when you came into power and then to date. And yeah, you left us with hope that by the time a parent or 2 parents actually make a national apology, then we are going to see fundamental change. But where we are today, it's doubtful. We are not yet seeing that fundamental change in reality to make us understand that the aspirations of the Constitution embedded there, just in the preamble, if nobody wants to read the entire Constitution because they say Ugandans, I don't know, Africans don't want to read, hide information in the book, at least read the preamble alone. To tell you the aspirations of this Constitution, where our foreparents who fought the wars that you fought. When you came into power was 1986. I was only in P7, P1. All I remember is my teacher telling me, duck down under the desks. I was in Shimoni Primary School, and I think you were taking over Radio Uganda. And bullets were raging all over the place, and the teacher told us, duck down under the tables. And I recall my auntie came for me. I think she was living maybe closest to, or working closest to Radio Uganda, picked me up and took me to her home. I spent that whole time in Bugolobi where my auntie stayed. And then a few months, so I don't even know how much time the war took, but I know thereafter my auntie took me back to our home, which was in Kabalagala, just above Kabalagala police station there. But on our way around Zambia police barracks and so on there, I could see men, women with bandage all over their heads and arms and so on. And that is really my memory of the LR 1986 liberation struggle. And it was so terrifying. And I'm hoping that our children and Uganda will not regress to that state alone again. I'm hoping that this Kisanja no more sleep and the so-called protecting the gains will actually be protecting the Constitution, the laws that we have, all the programs we've put in place to really uphold this nation and make meaning to the people of Uganda, whether any of those laws matter, whether this Kisanja protecting the gains really matter for all of us or for a selected few. I think for me, the ball is now in your court, our president, to come and explain to us what your son, General Muhoozi, is actually up to. Honorable, what's his name? By Chris who? Bariomus told us he acts the way he acts because he has Peter Pan syndrome. I don't know, we don't know, but Honorable yeah, he's very close to the family, I suppose. So probably they know better. But we are just seeking answers to all these questions that we ponder. And the answers lie nowhere else but with you, our president. to explain what is happening to this nation. In your election acceptance speech in January, I listened carefully. And one of the many things you set out to do, I think there were about 7 points, and among which I remember 2 very keenly, was enhancing access to justice and protecting the rights of all persons to access to justice in Uganda and fighting corruption. So what does that access to justice really mean? Is it going to be simply increasing money for the judiciary to recruit more judicial officers, maybe build more courthouses, but violate the rights of the legal representatives who must go in there and represent the clients and make the right to access to justice really have fundamental meaning to all Ugandans? I hope that in the next State of the Nation address that I'm expecting from you on the state of constitutionalism, rule of law, and democracy in this country, you, Mr. President, you will elucidate more on what you actually mean about that. Whether some of us belong to that right, to enjoy that fundamental right, or no, it's meant for a chosen few, depending on where they are coming from maybe, or which social class they belong to, or whether they are planned kids or not planned kids, because that is for us the Gen Z language. Those of us who teach at the university, we tend to adopt the Gen Z language. So, Mr. President, I implore you to speak to us as a nation and explain to us what your position really is on this matter, so we can have guided response to all that is happening. I want to also let members know, I stand here also on the platform of the academia. For those of you who have seen, our law students from the Makerere Law Society released their statement, and I'm grateful for to the students from Makerere University School of Law for the statement that they have released in light of this matter. I'm also grateful for Uganda Law Society. They shot right the first bullet to respond to this, as they should correctly do. Also, Honorable Asman Chiyinji, Honorable Betty Banyuma, they've all written. In fact, I say to myself, I will not talk law today. I will not cite those provisions, because those provisions have been cited, reiterated in all these statements. And even when you look at the composition of, I don't know, the council members or governing members of the PLU, they are made up of so many lawyers. The one that I know best, who was in law school closer to me, and I could say is an acquaintance, is Mr. Kasirinji. So I know Council Kasirinji, I know that they know the law, they know the provisions, but either they are choosing, and they are people who are intellectually gifted, really. From what I know, what I've seen, some of those that they are intellectually gifted. So I'm hoping that they will guide their leadership also on what should the right way to go in order to comply with Uganda's legal undertakings in its national documents and others. And I want them to know, all the duty bearers here, that for us who are in the academia, we no longer know what to teach. You're teaching constitutional law, you're teaching administrative law, you're teaching human rights law, and what is in the books is very different from what is on the ground. Actually, our Gen Zs there on the ivory tower now say, ebiri mu what? Elisha. Ebiri ku ground, bilala nnyo. That is now what they are talking. Okay? Because what we have in our law text is not what is actually happening in our country. And to recognize their efforts, I want to take this opportunity to also reiterate their prayers, as they stated it in their message to the nation. Elisha, I hope you can find it for me quickly. The prayers of the students from Makerere Law Society. I hope that the state of constitutionalism will change, human rights will change for a better Uganda, so that even as we teach our learners, they can resonate what is on ground can resonate with what is in the books, in the Constitution, in the law books. As I was coming here, I was listening to the presentation from the leader of opposition, Honorable Joel Ssenyonyi. I implore all Ugandans to listen to it again, and very keenly. Honorable Ssenyonyi, I want to applaud you. You are a graduate of the School of Law, Makerere University. I want you to know that we are expecting a lot from you as the leader of opposition to steer this country in the right direction, the way we taught you, so that you do not embarrass us, that the marks we gave you were just empty marks. You must defend the country, and we are happy that you're there, and you're speaking for us, and speaking and defending the law degree that you got from Makerere University. To the judiciary, a lot has been said that you must tighten your belt and up your game. And we should really see that what you state in the strategic plan 2025-2026 and all the judicial documents, judicial annual reports, judicial theme of the year, a people-centered judiciary for socio-economic transformative development of Uganda. We must breathe life into those aspirations that you have in the strategic plan, in your goals. Your mandate under Article 126 to 129. Let us believe, let us know that the judiciary is actually independent and it's going to do its work with a people-centered approach, with a human rights-based approach. Yesterday on Twitter, our president, Semakade, was screaming his head out and saying, we must administer criminal procedure with a human rights approach. Not pocketing yourself in some little bubble and just applying the law, you know, as it's black and white, without thinking, what are the human rights standards here? As a judicial officer, how should I uphold them? Just last week, I was in a judicial training, a training with judicial officers. And in that training, the current CJ, Dr. Chief Justice Zeiga, he called on judicial officers to uphold human rights in the administration of justice and adjudicating their cases and in undertaking their work. And such a time has come when Ugandans must really feel the weight of the judiciary in upholding human rights with a human rights approach and a people-centered justice system. It hurts when some of us who go into the communities and we try to reach out to people and tell them about the law, provide legal aid, etc., etc. You hear people in the community all they say, the law is for Bagagga. Fabavu, the law is not for us. Mateka tetu yamba, koti tetu yamba. We must change that perspective. When Justice Segonda Ntende gave his farewell speech, I think many of you read Justice Segonda Ntende's farewell speech on social media. He called on judicial officers to be the Wambuzis. I remember that statement there. Where are the Wambuzis? Where are the what, you know? He was calling on judicial officers to rise up and uphold justice like the previous judicial officers. You can go back and read his statement. And you see, I shared that statement on a number of platforms and so on. And in one of the platforms, the comments were, that is postmortem. Remember, he resonated the case of this Nup leader who is still in detention and could not even be granted bail to come and bury his wife who had died of cancer, etc., etc., and the children were there. He went back to that case and said, how much could a judicial officer not employ a human rights-based approach to that moment and give a husband, a father, a time to be with his children at such a difficult time? But when we shared it around, some voices were saying, it's postmortem. He's making those statements when the events have already passed. So he should, you know. And we don't want those comments to come up. We don't want you judicial officers to make these good, empowering speeches of the rest of the bench when you're saying farewell. When you're saying farewell to us as Ugandans or to the bench. We need you to say those speeches now, when the Constitution is really at a point of disarray. And to call on your colleagues to uphold their mandate. Ladies and gentlemen, I speak also remembering Article 17 of our Constitution. You know, General Muhoozi has told us, what was his statement? I inviolate what? Lawyers. Well, if you don't want to see us as lawyers and the role we have to play in this country, then see us as citizens of Uganda, who must enjoy the equal rights and freedoms as enshrined in Chapter 4 of our Constitution and Article 21 of the Constitution. And Article 20 that enjoins the state to which you belong to uphold the inherent rights and freedoms of all Ugandans. And for some of us who do not have the military might and the power and the resources, Article 17 of the Constitution calls upon us as citizens to defend the human rights and freedoms enshrined in the Constitution for all Ugandans, for the most vulnerable Ugandans, etc. And for the radical new bar, our strength is only as good as the strength of every vulnerable advocate out there. If we are all scared off from representing our clients because the next thing you know, you're going to be accused of being privy to the crime that the client has actually committed, then who is going to represent the nation? The aspirations of the president to uphold access to justice in this Kisanja no more sleep. How are we going to realize it? How are we going to realize the National Development Plan for etc. if all lawyers dive under the carpet? So at least we are citizens. If you don't want to recognize us as lawyers, at least recognize us as citizens and read Article 17 of the Constitution and Article 3 of the Constitution that was enacted in 1995 at a time when President Museveni was already president, and he ascended to these documents because he believed in the aspirations and the spirit of these documents, or the letter of the law written therein. We have heard Honorable Maria Matembe and others, Chief Justice Emeritus Owindolo, talking of how they were part and parcel of the process of enacting the 1995 Constitution. Some of us are just receiving it as we grow. I think it actually hurts them when they see what is actually happening. Some of them may be placed in positions where they cannot speak. They cannot speak to the powers that be because of the positions that they hold. But their hearts must bleed, or must be bleeding, at what they now see happening. So as I conclude, Elisha, did you find it? As I conclude, I hope we shall soon have national prayers for this nation, but meaningful ones, not the hypocritical ones that are always hard wasting taxpayers' money. And yet the same persons in the so-called national prayers are the ones actually perpetrating and violating the rights of the people of Uganda. Honorable both, the new Speaker of Parliament, has told us in his acceptance speech how he's going to uphold constitutionalism and so on and so forth. I hope it was not a speech made in excitement as you were enjoying the fruits of the tree that Honorable Mao had shook. As you said, you are enjoying the fruits of Honorable Mao. But I really hope you mean well for the country, and I saw you're one of the members of the PLU Governing Council. So I believe as Speaker of Parliament, you will also take the mantle upon yourself to address all these regressive events that are occurring against the tenets of our Constitution. And as I leave this podium, allow me reiterate the prayers of our students from the law faculty as stated in their Makerere Law Society statement. After stating all the laws that are being violated with the events around Honorable Erias Lukwago, Omuloti, They have prayed. Number one, immediate and unconditional release of Erias Lukwago, or produce him before the competent court of law without further delay in compliance with Article 23(4) of the Constitution. Disclose without equivocation his current whereabouts and the state of health to his family and his legal counsel and the Uganda Law Society. We see what happened as of yesterday. Guarantee his unimpeded access to legal representation and family visitation in accordance with the Constitution and the Ugandan Prison Act. Institute an independent and transparent investigation into the conduct of officers involved in this operation with a view of accountability under both military and civil law. And then finally, take all necessary measures to guarantee that no advocate, judicial officer, or litigant shall be subjected to intimidation, abduction, or reprisal for the lawful exercise of their constitutional and professional duties. For God and my country. Thank you very much.